All right, perfect. All right, well, people are still coming in, flying in very rapidly. We're excited to have everybody here today. This event is one that we've been really looking forward to. We're excited to have our guest speakers today. But before I go into introductions, really quickly, because some of you guys are new, or at least newer to our events here in Kansas City, wanted to give you a little bit of a rundown around conscious capitalism. Hopefully you guys have heard of the movement. If you haven't, you're at least intrigued, and that's why you're here. But conscious capitalism is made up of 4 tenets or principles, whatever you want to call them. The first one being higher purpose, conscious leadership, conscious culture, and stakeholder orientation. Conscious capitalism as a whole has kind of the mothership, we like to call it, is the organization, the main nonprofit organization, which is where Alexander is from. And it's a global community where we are dedicated to supporting businesses who are in it to elevate humanity through their business practices in a more conscious way. So hopefully you guys, will, if you're intrigued, there's lots of resources out there. You can research conscious capitalism. There's a book on it. We have our resources here in Kansas City. We're happy to help with anything that you have questions on. But it's a really, really exciting time for this movement, and we're excited about today's content. Before I go into anything else further, I just want to let you guys know we do have an event coming up on May 18th. It's on our website, consciouscapitalism.org/Kansas City. Andy Eby of Bickford Senior Living will be our speaker for Higher Purpose. We're really, really excited about having Andy Eby. He has actually been involved with Conscious Capitalism, Inc. For several years. He's a really, really great figure in the community as a whole. He's super passionate, very contagious personality, amazing speaker. When you hear him talk, you will come away inspired. I absolutely can make that assurance 100%. So that's April 13th, Higher Purpose. That's going to be our why on Higher Purpose. And then the follow-up to that is May 18th, Higher Purpose Learning Connection, which is the how. So that's where we do a workbook. We work together as a community to advance the principles of higher purpose and work through kind of more of the tactics on how to do that. So it is kind of a partnership between those 2 events. If you can't make it to both, we understand, but one or the other is better than none of them. So look to our website, and we'll share a little bit more information, put a link out on the chat too to those events so that you guys have easy access to them. So without further ado, because it's already 12:07 here in Kansas City, I want to introduce you guys to Alexander McCobin. It is my distinguished honor to introduce him. He is the president and CEO of Conscious Capitalism, Inc., and has been since 2017. And we're excited to hear from you today, Alexander.
Christina, thank you so much for not just that introduction, but everything that you and the rest of the board for the chapter are doing to build conscious capitalism in Kansas City. This is one of the most important efforts possible right now that, as Karen and I are going to talk about, because for over a decade, this movement has been building up momentum. And whereas 10 years ago, the ideas and principles of conscious capitalism were not discussed in boardrooms, they weren't presented at conferences, it's becoming the buzzwords of the day. And there is an opportunity for us to really bring about a significant transition to a future where conscious capitalism is the norm. And today, I'm just so excited to have a conversation with one of our board members, Karen Sammon, about where we've come from, where we're going as a movement, and her personal journey with this as an illustration of that, and her insights as to what the future of business looks like with all of the changes happening in this conscious capitalist direction. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Karen, let me give just a little boilerplate about her before I give her a chance to really introduce herself. Karen is a CEO, president, management executive, public company board member, and conscious capitalist who has a track record of spearheading turnarounds, driving corporate transformations, including with digital and cultural change, and even transitioning business models from transactional to recurring revenue. And in one of her most recent positions, she was the former CEO, president, board member of PAR Technology, where when she joined, she was responsible for $240 million of revenue across restaurant, retail, and government, grew that over the years into a valuation of par to nearly $500 million in 2018. It's just been an absolute honor and pleasure to get to know Karen over the years with Conscious Capitalism, and I think you're all going to love getting to know her as well. And so, Karen, I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your day to talk about where we've come from and the future of conscious capitalism with the chapter, and actually invite you to just share a little bit more about your story, especially how you came to conscious capitalism and realized that you were a conscious capitalist.
Mm-hmm. Alexander, it's so good to be here. It's so good to be with the chapter. Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate that kind of introduction. So I grew up in upstate New York, and upstate New York is not just outside of New York City. It is a small towns, farmland, little cities dotted across much of New York State. Only a small part is downstate. And there's a lot of manufacturers and companies that grew up supporting the government and transforming into different kinds of businesses. And PAR Technology was one of those. It started in the small town of Utica, New York, and grew to be a large supplier of technology to the restaurant industry. My father was the founder of the company, and in 2013, I took over the company as president. When I had been in previous jobs and had left the company for a number of years, and when I returned, I found that the company was in a situation where many of our products were commoditized. We were losing market share, and we were in need of a turnaround. And I had the opportunity in the early part of my career to be able to work with other management teams on turnarounds and transformations as an executive. And this was my opportunity to do this for our company. And what was important to me was that, and when we were working through the transformation, that we would have the opportunity to keep the company in the small town of Utica, where we employed nearly 300 people. So about 30% of our workforce was in the small town. And it was really important that we were able to keep the employees there. During this, we also knew that we were going to be moving from a hardware systems integrator type of a business to a software solutions company, and that would require upskilling different people and transitioning them to different roles while we move the company into a software-oriented company. So as much as it was a digital transformation, the piece that I knew was going to be so important was the cultural transformation, which led me through just serendipitously to a consultant in our industry who had been involved in conscious capitalism. He in turn introduced me, and it led me to the opportunity to really lean into the philosophy, which was not very far from how I thought about business, about doing well and doing good, serving our communities and our stakeholders, which was not in my lexicon at that time, and working with the culture to ensure that it was healthy and able to then support me. What they needed was what I was focused on, and there in turn, they were able to provide back to me. So that was my journey that I feel like I tipped into conscious capitalism, and it became really the foundation for our success.
And what was it like implementing conscious capitalism as a part of the turnaround, Karen? I'm curious what kind of support you got or opposition you faced and how you worked through all of that.
Yeah, it was, so I was really enthusiastic about how when I discovered that there was actually a philosophy and tenets and a process for being able to implement conscious capitalism. So I came back to my management team, and I came back to the management team, and with the idea of bringing the full force of conscious capitalism into the organization. And what I learned was that I needed to slow down and to take it in bits and pieces. So as I learned, as we started down our journey, we first re-engaged with our values and our purpose, and that was the first step to being able to bring the other tenets of conscious capitalism into the business. I had, as we did this, we looked at the DNA of the company and really thought deeply about what was going to guide us through a difficult transformation. We started in 2013, where we were on the verge of bankruptcy, to doing a transformation, then leading into the transformation. So as we embarked on it, we first focused on our values, and as we started to really live our values, then we were able to lean into how we wanted to develop the culture. And I focused predominantly on the culture because that was what was in most need. So I was taking a 50-year-old company and bringing conscious capitalism into its fabric. And the way that I felt it was going to be most effective was by leveraging what DNA existed there already, and then bringing the company forward.
What I appreciate about your story is that I think it's emblematic of what it was like to bring conscious capitalism to businesses generally over the past decade. It was finding those kernels of the idea that others could latch on to really plant and see it grow. But then in 2020, a lot changed in the world. And it's not only was it a challenging time for so many businesses, but it also interestingly became a time when a lot of companies started to perhaps think about their purpose and taking care of their stakeholders. At the start of the pandemic, the Financial Times said this was going to be an acid test for conscious capitalism, because they expected a lot of businesses to jettison what they considered fluffy language and commitments that didn't really help the bottom line. But as the editor of Fortune has been documenting over the past year, more businesses are coming to principles like purpose and stakeholder orientation, actually because of the pandemic. And so I'm curious what you've seen working with so many businesses, especially over this past year, with regards to how they're receiving these ideas now, what changes they've been making, and just what it's been like from your vantage point.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Before I jump into that, just one comment. So as I was, as we were going through our transformation, and this is 2014 to 2019, and then continuing on since I've departed, one of the things that became really clear was, in addition to focusing on the culture, in order for us to make our transformation from a hardware to systems integrator, we supported companies like McDonald's and Taco Bell and KFC, Carl's and Hardee's, big tier 1 clients in the restaurant industry. And then we were moving down market with our new software solutions products. We needed to make sure that our employees were going to make the journey with us, but also that our customers were going to make the journey with us. So as we were moving toward providing them with things with equipment, hardware that they were accustomed to receiving from us, we also wanted them to take the journey with us on the software side. So building that trust that we had gained over 40 years of business was so important for being able to manage that transformation. So the reason that I bring it up was that conscious capitalism is a way of doing business that, from my perspective and from my case, we had already been practicing much of what the tenets espouse. And it was fine tuning and bringing language and common language to our organization and to our suppliers and to our clients and to our shareholders, because PAR is a public company, about the journey that we were going on. And so if you look at the outcome and what has happened with PAR's journey, there's no way I should not have been able to be effective and successful in a transformation. In more than, only 20, maybe 25% of companies actually make that pivot in a transformation. And the percentage that succeed as the company becomes more stressed, it decreases. So our ability to transform from hardware systems integration to cloud-based software solutions was tiny, and it was a Hail Mary. And the trust that we had developed with our employees and with our other stakeholders was the thing that brought us through. So coming full circle to 2020, when I think about, I spend all my time in the restaurant, retail, hospitality industry, and as the pandemic shut down restaurants, it's really heartbreaking. And so those of us who are conscious capitalists that are in this industry really got together to support and to give whatever help we could to this important part of the industry. The restaurant industry and restaurant industry alone is about 3% of our GDP. So it is very significant and employs about 15 million people. And we shut down. And we all know that because we all experience it in one way or the other. Those that really succeeded had certain attributes, and a lot of them, whether they knew it or not, were able to survive because they took care of their employees. They took care of their communities in a time of deep stress, and there in turn, suppliers took care of them. The real estate market really backed up the industry, and the government came around, in turn to then provide the PPP and the support and stability for the industry because it was so important for us and for our economy. But when you talk to different restaurant organizations, like one out of DC comes to mind, Founding Farmers, they were successful. All the restaurants shut down. On March 15th, they were doing great business. On March 16th, they were shut down. And on March 17th, they had to talk about what they were going to do to support their employees who are no longer going to be able to be employed. And that has come back around full circle. So as we're starting to open back up, those companies that really did think strategically about taking care of their stakeholders are having the reverse effect. Now everybody's looking to say, how can we support you as you come back online so we can all win?
It's remarkable to see just how companies have used these principles to get through this challenging period. And I'm wondering if you've noticed anything from companies who maybe weren't interested in conscious capitalism before, especially that you're hearing either in the community or the industry. Do you actually think that Alan Murray from Fortune is right from your experience that more companies are leaning into these principles and are going forward?
I think what I hear, from talking in my community and then talking into the communities where I'm now doing business, is that there are more leaders who are more aware of the need to use their wherewithal, use the business to elevate humanity. And so whether they're thinking about it in our terms of elevating humanity through business, whether they're thinking about it in terms of, hey, I am here to do more than just provide shareholder value, that cannot be the only reason that I get up in the morning and go to work. It is not the only reason. It's not even, it doesn't cross my mind every day when I get up and work. I don't think about how much value I can provide to my shareholders. I'm thinking about, how we can build a better business and to provide more of our products and solutions to more people, and how we can take care of our employees and how we can serve our communities. These are the things that get me excited and get others excited about the work that we're doing. I hear so much about the workforce, especially as we're moving into a hybrid environment, and we're talking about high stress, whether it's in the restaurant, retail, industry or outside. The anxiety and depression and stress that has been exposed by the pandemic that probably existed pre-pandemic is at an all-time high. And those employers who are thinking about the well-being of their employees are the ones that are going to excel in the future. And I think that more and more companies are recognizing that care is what's so important for getting the flywheel going and building more success, because the more you care for the people who are in partnership with you to build your business, the more they're going to give back. And that I saw that directly as we were doing our transformation. We were doing extraordinary things, and people were working enormously long hours, but they weren't doing it because of the paycheck. They weren't doing it because they thought that they were going to get a bigger bonus. We were doing it because it was really exciting and it was really meaningful. And the work that we were doing was intentional. And so because we had a bigger purpose in the direction of the company, people were motivated, and I was astonished, frankly. And I'm seeing the same thing right now. We saw the same thing in the beginning of the pandemic, where so many people were like, what can we do to keep our businesses on track? And leaders saying, how can I bottle this? Well, it's not bottling it because of the pandemic. It's how we work together going forward, and always, probably. And if you didn't know it in the past, you certainly can take a page out of the pandemic to see how we can do it going in a better way in the future. Turning the question back to you, Alexander, I've had a lot about me. Maybe you can take a step and talk about the momentum that conscious capitalism is gaining and how it relates to, you built a movement in the past. Maybe you can see like what kind of parallels you see in how you built a movement in your experience, and how you see us shifting out of 2020 into 2021, how you see that momentum building.
So I think 2020 was a pivotal year for the conscious capitalism movement because of two reasons. The first is that I think what you're describing and that Alan Murray's been documenting in Fortune is absolutely correct, that more business leaders are coming around to these principles, whether because they recognized it before or they're just discovering it in the wake of the pandemic, that these are the principles that drive success for business. This is the future of business and capitalism. And so they're starting to embrace the ideas, even if they don't quite understand it right now, and they want to learn how to implement it. And we saw that when we pivoted our annual conference last year from an in-person event to a virtual one to support our community and introduce these ideas to more people at the very beginning of the pandemic. We typically get anywhere between 400 and 700 people at our annual conference. We had over 4,500 people participate in our virtual conference in April at the same time last year, with limited promotion and exposure to others. And that's because there was a demand for these ideas finally that we've seen continue throughout the year. And so that's the one thing that I think is driving the growth of the movement right now. The second is this pivot to the digital world that I think is really exciting, because in-person events have magical connections. We are always going to have them, especially when we're able to come back together safely. I mean, knock on wood, we are really hoping we get to put the annual CEO Summit for Conscious Capitalism on this October again, back in Austin, Texas. But we've really used 2020 as an organization to make the digital pivot and provide ongoing support to conscious capitalists day in and day out, which is what you really need in order to build a movement. You have these individual events once or twice a year to serve as a rallying event, an opportunity for people to just feel good about this, make those magical connections, and bring it back to their companies. But that's not enough. If you're going to grow a movement, you need to build a robust network of individuals who share a common approach to business and are in conversation with each other to push each other to do better, to get support from each other, and then share what they're doing and what they discover with the rest of the movement so that everyone keeps getting better. And we didn't have that really before 2020, but have built out now what we're calling our Conscious Capitalist Senior Leader Network for senior leaders to support their peers and get support from them and develop that platform for us to really grow the movement going forward. And we're going to use that as a launching pad in order to support many more conscious capitalists in various ways as we keep building out this digital presence. And what we've really seen is that this is not an either or. This is a yes and. We have the opportunity both to have ongoing virtual support for conscious capitalists around the year, and put in-person events on when we're able to do so safely, which we're really excited about doing. So I'll even say here, for anyone here who is interested in learning more about the Senior Leader Network that we piloted last year and we're launching right now, reach out to me afterwards at alexander@consciouscapitalism.org. I'd be happy to talk with you about it. And we want to keep working in tandem with all of our local chapters to build up this global movement, because that's the other thing that's become really interesting with this pivot. We have so many more businesses interested in conscious capitalist ideas. We're connected to each other virtually, and that means we have a stronger connection between local businesses and the global network of conscious capitalist businesses than ever before. We want to keep bridging that gap to support each other and to keep building this movement.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. I had started the Upstate New York chapter of Conscious Capitalism in the Syracuse area. We have a chapter in Rochester, and there's one in New York City, but there's nothing in the middle of the state. And I've been bringing conscious leaders together for a number of years. And I launched it at the end of February of last year. And I felt really, felt really uncomfortable with pursuing the chapter in the first half of 2020, maybe the first 3 quarters of 2020, as companies were struggling to figure out their way, and some were doing really well, and some were really struggling. Others were working in the healthcare industry, and so it was really an awkward time. At the same time, the demand for the conversation around conscious capitalism, as we saw at the April conference, was growing. So I put it on the back burner for a little bit, and I'm sorry about the noise. So I put it on the back burner for a little bit, and then at the beginning of this year, I've had leaders reach out to me to have me pick up the pace of building the chapter. So the demand is coming. The demand is coming from others in the community that want to learn more, find out how we can share ideas, tell our stories, to accelerate the adoption of conscious capitalism within their own organizations. And so that has been really, really inspirational to me. And so maybe I thought that maybe you could talk, maybe you could talk a little bit more about the Senior Leader Network, because that I think is going to excite a lot more leaders to come into conscious capitalism.
And that highlights actually, I think, a third big change in 2020 that's really important here, because we're also seeing a shift away from leaders being interested in just the principles or the theory of conscious capitalism. They get that now. They're on board with these ideas. But the question so many are asking now is, how do I put this into practice, especially for businesses and leaders who are new to concepts like a higher purpose and stakeholder orientation? And there's an opportunity and a demand for the conscious capitalism movement to point to those companies and leaders who have been practicing this for years, for decades, for generations, to say, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have examples of what to do. It's not platitudes. It's not saying every company needs to fit this cookie cutter approach, because that's one of the great things about conscious capitalism. It's not a cookie cutter approach. It's about the values that drive leaders and companies for them to apply to their unique circumstances. But you learn from other people. You learn from what's been done well, what's been done poorly, and being in community with others who influence the way that you think and what you do. And that's really the calling to conscious capitalism at the global and local levels, for us to highlight the businesses that have been practicing this for a long time, and getting you to share what you've been doing with those who are new to these ideas, so they really understand what this looks like in practice and can implement it themselves. So we're seeing a transition from the theory to the practice of conscious capitalism very quickly. And that's one of the great opportunities for us in 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, I agree that telling the stories of how different leaders and different industries have been able to implement the principles of conscious capitalism is incredibly powerful. And as I have as you know, I started a business in 2019 to focus on acquiring businesses that are looking to transform. So in my community, we have a number of small manufacturers. I'm in the Rust Belt. So in the Rust Belt, there's a large number of small manufacturers, and I have started to acquire businesses that have commonalities to be able to transform. And the premise of it is to look for those opportunities to build conscious businesses with assets that are really fantastic. And one of the things that happens, and I'm not sure about in your community in Kansas City, but when businesses start to age, they are acquired and then moved out of our area, and that negatively impacts our economy. So our focus is to keep the businesses in our communities, upskill employees, and start to grow and accelerate the businesses to raise the economy. And it's not like it's some kind of brilliant new idea, but it is gaining more traction from the community to help us to identify those businesses. And the great thing about this is that what I'm finding is that owners, founders, leaders are looking for ways to come together to be able to make sure that their businesses stay in our communities. And in this way, I don't necessarily have to pay the top dollar for the business, but I'm able to keep the owners in the business, transfer the knowledge, and to build the communities. And so there's ways that we are leveraging conscious capitalism to build the economy in a part of the country that has traditionally suffered.
I think that's absolutely right. And so I want to make sure that we have time for questions and conversation with all of you here in the chapter. But one more question from me for you, Karen, which is, with all these changes happening right now and the businesses that you're working with, what do you think are some of the trends that we're going to see in 2021 and 2022, not just with the new normal that everyone's talked about, but especially how conscious capitalist companies and leaders really should be looking at the future after we get past COVID?
From my perspective, I think that what we've learned in COVID, during COVID, is from the slowdown, has taught us ways that we are thinking more broadly about our stakeholders, about our communities, and about ourselves, about self-care for leaders. I believe that the hybrid, everybody's talking about this. I listened to a podcast this morning about the hybrid workplace. It's here to stay. And how will we create community within our organizations? How will we take care of our employees as the most important asset within our organizations? And how will we serve them through a focus on values? I think that as we're seeing in the Business Roundtable and BlackRock Capital and the World Economic Forum, there is increasing conversation around the principles of conscious capitalism, and that we need to be looking at the whole ecosystem in a very more intentional way. So I believe, and I hope that all of us that are on this call are looking for that direction, that we can take these principles, bring them to our own organizations, articulate them within our community in a ways that meet other people and other leaders, where you can create that connection. Because not all leaders will jump right in, but at the foundation, it makes a lot of business sense. And when you hear from Andy Eby next week, or at your next time that you get together, he's going to talk about leading with love, because that is what he does, and he is unabashed about that being so important. And I do subscribe to the fact that as leaders, we can look at what we do through a lens of leading in our own way through love. And I think that will be what will come true and become more accepted in the industries as we go forward.
Thank you, Karen. I think that is such an important final takeaway for everyone before we turn it over to Q&A. And Christina, do you want to facilitate the Q&A? Should I, or how
Yeah.
do you want to approach this?
No, I'm good. I've been getting some questions. So I'm going to
Great.
start first with Delinda. Delinda, I believe you're in California, so thanks for joining us. She has an interesting question that I think probably a lot of people would be interested to know. I know here at Redemption Plus, it's something we have worked on as well. But in the process of building a very conscious culture and employing millennials that maybe have never had a pre-conscious capitalist work experience, and then going through the struggles of COVID and trying to keep people on, avoid layoffs, trying to do the best that you can to take care of your companies. And this is actually for you, Karen, specifically, is have you experienced, the challenges of your culture kind of becoming accustomed to the things that you do and it kind of loses its spark, right? Like it's just not a special thing anymore. It's kind of laissez-faire, just business as usual, because people just they don't have anything really to compare it to.
Yeah. So I think the question is really about like today, but I will relate it back to my recent experience, where when I stepped into my previous role as CEO at PAR, it was a culture of fear. It was a toxic culture, and and starting there, that's the lowest rung, and so you have to start to build trust, and it was multi-generational. So I had people who were working for the company who were in their 70s and even 80s, to new employees that were in their 20s, and so we had to relate to a number of different worldviews and expectations of different employees in a very negative culture. And that's why there was so much emphasis on culture, because I needed the organization to do something exceptional and spectacular and incredibly hard. And I wasn't exactly sure how to navigate those waters. I that you need to communicate. You need to build trust, and then I needed a community to be able to talk very openly about the challenges that I was having, to be able to
be vulnerable,
new different things. And then when you think about today, where people are distanced, I think it is incredibly hard. And then there's new tools that are becoming more available to help create community and connection. But it will be the biggest challenge for leaders to be able to maintain your culture in a world that is increasingly distant. So there's talk about being in the workplace 2 days a week and out of it 3 days a week, or vice versa. And it's going to be a new set of challenges, but which is why I think that the principles of conscious capitalism and the community around conscious capitalism become even more important.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So another question we have from Sarah Kane is about B Lab and B Corp movement and how it relates to conscious capitalism. And I did see Ann St. Peter and a couple people from Global Prayer here. They're one of our speakers in 2019. And they're a local, actually really pioneering the B movement here in Kansas City. So yeah, it's a great question. How does it relate? How does it all come together, B Lab and the B movement with conscious capitalism? So maybe that's you, Alexander. Yeah,
I'd be happy to take that one. The B Corp movement is one of our allies. They're working in the similar space of business as a force for good, but have a different strategy than us. They are primarily in the certification business, where they have a checklist of things they think companies should do, and they measure companies against that, which companies can go and get certified for. They can even change their legal status to be committed to. And that's one approach, an important approach to take for this. Conscious capitalism, instead of having a certification for companies or that checklist of things every company should do, going back to what I mentioned earlier, we have a set of values that leaders should run their companies on, that businesses should be committed to. Having a higher purpose than just maximizing profit, stakeholder orientation to find win-win-wins for everyone rather than focusing on a single group, conscious leadership to embody those values of the company, and conscious cultures where everyone can bring their authentic selves to work. And that leads us to saying that this is going to look different for each company. Two conscious capitalist businesses can use the reasoning of those four tenets with working in the same industry and come to different conclusions about how to handle a difficult situation or what policy to implement in their business. And that's the point of conscious capitalism. That's part of the vibrancy of this. It's a commitment to certain ideas and reasoning. So what we do is provide the association structure, the opportunity to connect with like-minded business leaders, to learn from each other and push each other to do better, rather than a certification approach. And in some ways, these are really complementary because we provide a lot of training from peers in industry to be a better conscious capitalist leader, which B Corp can't do because it would be a conflict of interest for them to be both trainer and certifier. So they very intentionally don't get into that space. So if you look at it this way, we are complementary strategies for how we advance this. B Corp working on the certification side, conscious capitalism working on the education and peer-to-peer support side, which we are increasingly leaning into, especially as I talked about before, with this virtual membership model in addition to in-person events to bring us together.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I'd also add that I think it's like a yes and. So, you have conscious capitalism as a philosophy and how to really run a company that can outperform. And then you have a B Corp that can help you measure some of those attributes. But it's, when you in conscious capitalism, I think that you'll hear most great companies, it's values first, always values first. And, then you can look at who in your company, and that goes into your culture. And if you get those right and you define your stakeholders, then you can get into the B Corp certification, which is also very important and helps. And it's a great measurement, and it's incredibly hard to attain. And so it's yes and.
Yeah, that's great. This question actually, we get often, we've had some really robust conversations around it. It's actually from Delinda, and it's about the verbiage, the words of both conscious and capitalism, right? And a lot of younger people, millennials and younger, have a tendency to be against capitalism, right? Because of the modern day view of what we've seen that has happened with capitalism, right? So what kind of conversations or suggestions have you guys had around this? I thought it was great. She said that she's actually using the word #ethical entrepreneurism for kind of more curiosity around the movement. So, but maybe that you can answer this first, Alexander, from your perspective.
It's a great question, and it's something that we get asked a lot and really important to what conscious capitalism stands for, because we are not just about conscious business, about individual businesses adopting these practices. A core premise of our philosophy is that the system of free enterprise capitalism is one of the greatest ideas humanity has come up with, because it is a system that is inherently good, ethical, noble, and heroic. It is creating value for people. It is lifting humanity out of poverty. It is based on free transactions with each other, and it has the ability for us to keep progressing going forward. And understanding that system is critical to the future of humanity. Now, what's interesting about the way young people look at this now with a lot of the surveys that have been done is that they may have a negative reaction to the term capitalism, but when you actually define it and contrast it with alternative systems, they start to support it at levels we've seen in previous generations as well. And what that suggests is there's a misunderstanding about this system out there. And it's largely because the narrative of what capitalism means has been mistold and misrepresented. That's one of the things that conscious capitalism is committed to changing. We're committed to improving both the practice of capitalism, what individual businesses and leaders do, and the perception of capitalism, highlighting the stories of those businesses and leaders who are practicing it the right way, a conscious way, who are creating value for everyone that they touch, who are making the world a better place through this. We need more of those stories out there in the world to inspire people to not just generally support capitalism, but for young people to go into business to make the world a better place and to use the tools available to solve the greatest challenges that we're facing. So it's really important for us to get the verbiage right, and for us to recognize that we are committed to both the microeconomics and the macroeconomics of this system, and highlighting the best it has to offer by leaning into that going forward.
Yeah, that's great. And then I actually have a follow-up for you, Karen, that's right in this vein. I hope I don't get the name wrong, but I think it's Heaping.
It's Hubing.
Yeah,
I'm from the Lemon Group. We are a expert information network, and yeah, I'm very interested in this topic.
Oh, great. Thanks for joining us. So Karen, for you in the same vein is, how do you personally try to overcome the misconception around this big corporations having, distrust or feeling like big companies are preventing, the advancement, right, of what we're trying to do as a humanity? So personally, in your experience, have you encountered that, and what are you doing, or what have you done that would be a great practice for others to maybe think about on how you can kind of counter that?
It's a great question. So, when I first was introduced to conscious capitalism, my immediate reaction was, that's an oxymoron. And, and it can't possibly be true that people can, do both. And it was like kind of like that dynamic tension between consciousness and capitalism. I'm like, okay, you need to really think about what this movement's trying to do and lean into that. It was almost like discomfort, like, can I do both? And it stretched me as a leader, and really pushed me. I spent the first half of my career being a pure capitalist, pure looking only at the numbers. That was how I ran it. That's how I was educated. That's how I was mentored. That's how the roles I had to play. And I did it. And I can't say that I am really proud of how I just looked at everything as a transaction, but that's how I lived. Someplace around 2009, 2010, it just was meaningless to me. And I did not want to be in this world anymore. And I was being promoted because I was successful. And it was not how I wanted to be remembered. It was not how I wanted to lead organizations and people. And it was an awakening. And so as I then grew, I started to think about much more about the people that I was leading and how I was showing up, and what the long-term implications were to my leadership. And that was a big shift. The consciousness part then became more than just, I want to do well and do good. I wanted to be good, and I wanted to be a teacher, and I wanted to bring out the best in people, and shed this harsh exterior that I had developed for myself. So if you look at me as a leader, 15 years ago, and me as leader in this current stage, I'm actually more of an authentic person, and I will cry because things move me. I, will be frustrated and talk about my frustrations and bring conflict to the table in a healthy way, because this is what excites and develops people. So it wasn't, I got pushback from leadership, about this culture thing, and like, it's not a thing, it is culture, about this conscious capitalism, and it's just too woo-woo, and trying to say but it is not woo-woo. It produces results. The end result, the end of the story around Par Technology is, when I started, we were a $250 million company with a $63 million valuation. When I exited, our valuation was north of 600 million. So we had grown exponentially over that period of time. Yeah, we made some really good calculations about the moves of markets, what our competition was going through and where we needed to move, but it was all the people. The people made it happen. Today, the valuation is around $2 billion. So, and it is directly attributable to putting the values first and the people.
Yeah, that's inspiring. I can really relate to a lot of what you said, Karen. I think a lot of people can. So when you're on that journey, you kind of gravitate more towards your authentic self, and there's more vulnerability and more realness, and you're really connecting at a deeper level with people. So it's very inspiring, as well as the growth of PAR technology. So thank you. Kyle Danner, we have a question from Kyle. It's for you, Karen. What kind of organizations are you connecting with when it comes to keeping businesses in your community?
The most amazing. So I looked at what I knew. So, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to step off an abyss and take a company with me. So I looked at what I knew and about, so I've been in technology my whole career, and I love it. I wanted to go back into software, but I recognized that in the world that we're leaning into, and because of the challenges that we're having connecting as human beings, there's this really big disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street, however you want to define it, and there's a lot of fear around jobs going away because of technology. So I focus on manufacturers and tech services companies that have attributes of growth that have not been released yet. So company, I'm very interested. Let me tell you what I'm less interested in. I'm less concerned about people who are college educated, who are MBAs, who are lawyers, who are software developers. They will find their way through life. I am concerned about trade jobs and bringing people forward and developing skills that they can compete in this 21st century. So those are the types of companies that I'm looking for that could be left behind, but have the capability to be transformed.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. Sadie, Sadie was just sharing the 4 tenets there in our chat. Mark, given the underlying stress that COVID exposed, what is the status of stress management programs for employees incorporating such methods as yoga, Tai Chi, or mindfulness meditation? That could be for either of you.
Well, there's a lot of, those are really great ones. So, so because of COVID, and because I love technology, I've been looking at lots of different companies that are doing really interesting things to create connection. And there's a lot of them, but one that comes to mind is it's a conscious capitalist who is working on this platform, but it is a platform that connects people in teams that are distributed to create connection through music. And so, so there's a lot, so you can find a lot of these different kinds of platforms, but this one allows you to go in and kind of set your profile. The first song, like for my first dance when I was in elementary school, or the birth of my first child, or my wedding song, whatever those meaningful songs are, and then you break into groups and you talk about those experiences through music, and they're finding that it's creating a deeper connection with teams that are distributed to know more about each other, even though they can't get together in the work environment to have lunch or to go out for a drink after work, or however they would normally get together. But there's lots of different platforms out there that are being developed to be able to create connection. Another one, Verb, another conscious capitalist, a woman around business, and she has a learning management platform that really brings forward these principles of conscious capitalism, but also creates connection. So I think that we're going to be really creative going forward in ways that we're going to be able to connect. Zoom is doing a great job, but it doesn't really create that heartfelt connection that really generates amazing results within organizations.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, that's great. So real quickly, I know we're coming up on time. I do have one more question I'm going to ask you guys, and maybe this is for both of you. But if people have to leave right away, I just want to make sure you check out our website. Don't forget about our April 13th event with Andy Eby. You can continue to put questions on here. I think Karen and Alexander can stay a few minutes longer, and you guys are welcome to stay with us. But I just want to be mindful that we are coming up at the 12 o'clock point. So the next question, or the question that I have for you guys right now, is what is Conscious Capitalism's take, an opinion on cryptocurrencies and new forms of exchange? This is from Rebecca Saltman in Denver, and it's a great question.
So in general, conscious capitalism doesn't take stances on industries or what the future actually looks like. We're a platform for business leaders in a variety of industries to come together and say, we're committed to these principles and want to bring this forward. And we are starting to see more businesses in the crypto space actually reach out and want to get involved in conscious capitalism, whether it's with individual chapters or Conscious Capitalism Inc. And I can say that personally, I'm very excited to see them also recognize the power of conscious capitalism in this burgeoning industry, and looking forward to working with them and have them participate in our activities in the network and see how this evolves going forward.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Karen? Any thoughts at all about different forms of exchange and, currencies?
I think that cryptocurrency is really interesting. I believe that any industry can do good or be crony capitalist or worse. Really, if you think about currency, period, the financial industry, is not known for being particularly conscious. So if we can build more consciousness into our financial institutions, I think that we will all benefit tremendously. I think, and my experience and my feeling is that it will be the last holdout. They will be the least of the conscious. So let's work to bring them forward.
Absolutely. That's great. So any other questions that anybody has that they want to ask at this point? I think I got everything on the chat, but if there's any other burning questions.
Don't forget, if you have a minute, please fill out the survey that just got shared in the chat as well. It really helps us to keep these events meaningful for you as we go forward.
Yes, that's great. Thank you, Sadie, for the reminder. So I actually have a couple questions that came up for me. I wanted to make sure I got everybody else's questions before I jumped in there with my own. But in particular with Karen, what you shared around the challenges, right, of moving a company forward through this. I think that's such a meaningful and often overlooked area of transitioning to a conscious company. So I didn't know if you wanted to just take a few more minutes and maybe share like some of the pitfalls and the tactics that you used. I know personally, I was at the helm of Redemption Plus when we transitioned into more of a conscious company, and it was so painful. We had leaders that just weren't going to cut it, right? That they just didn't believe in the practices and the principles that we were espousing to at that point. We had employees, tremendous amounts of turnover. Our revenue dipped. But obviously after we got through that, like we soared through it. But I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses that could be tremendously terrified of that, right? When you think about, how a business is traditionally valued, it's based on your balance sheet, and if you've got, your purpose and your vision and you're wanting to move forward as a conscious company, but you have your, traditional business partners, they're looking at you like you're crazy. Your business is failing, right? Like it's taking a dip, but if you keep going, or at least you think, if you keep going along that path, it's going to improve. So any more kind of wisdom that you could share around your experiences around that?
Oh, Christina, your experiences are very similar. There's a definite parallel with that. I think that, if I was going to like replay and try to do it, it better, we had so many things we had to do. We were in a turnaround situation, so we had to divest assets, close offices, and international and domestic. My leadership team that I inherited was not going to come along for the journey. So I needed to transition people out and bring new leaders in, which is really hard to do, to be able to really find the essence of the people that were going to go along on the journey. And then we had the great experience of accelerated growth. So we went from a decline, a very rapid decline, to on the rails, to the Hail Mary of doing the transformation. And where one was like a negative spiral, the other one was a rapid growth. And both of them are hard. One's more fun, but both of them are hard. So bringing in, so I think I would have brought in, I came in full on, like, conscious capitalism, this is what we're going to do. And I think I would have brought the language and the examples of what you've done that was really great, and you're acting like consciously like a servant leader, or trying to bring examples of how the culture was going to grow. We didn't have that luxury. We just had to move. And there was, just to your experience, we had folks that weren't going to cut it, people who were right on board, and then the broad middle that was wanted to see how we were going to be making that shift. What things that were really hard was we defined our values by interviewing the entire organization. All 1,000 employees got to have a say in what were the values, what were their core values, what do they see in us, and we boiled it down to develop our values. Then getting us all to really close the gap between your walk and your talk, or making sure that there was no light between the walk and the talk. That was very hard. We were all committed, but it didn't mean that we were making decisions based upon our values. So a lot of times we were, and then sometimes we'd fall off the bus because we were a company in significant change. So it was, getting us moving closer to having the common language, being values focused, and then getting the right people in, and being able to let the people who weren't going to come along for the journey go. And sometimes they were really important people. And that's a really scary thing when you're a company that is in high growth, being, saying, okay, well, this person is kind of tanking us on our conscious capitalism journey, but they have a lot of knowledge, or they're the smartest, they are the best technologist in a certain area, or they've got the best relationship with the client. Maybe, but if they're not bringing your values forward and they're not espousing the direction you're going as a conscious company, then they're poison. And you gotta be strong enough to know that the people are the link, they're the absolute glue between you being both a conscious company and toward that higher success. So they're married together.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Karen. And thank you so much, Alexander. That's actually a great segue into the content of our next event, right? Like, what is your higher purpose? And then how do you go about implementing that, into your organization and carrying forward those values and everything that you want to transform in your company. So I'm really grateful for both of you. I know Alexander has to run, and Karen, I'm very grateful for both of you. This has been an amazing event, and I'm grateful we still have 28 people engaged and on here even 8 minutes after, which is a phenomenal sign of the value of this conversation. And I thank everybody for joining us today. We're very grateful. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Christina, and everyone for being here and all that you're doing to build the conscious capitalism movement. You're going to have a great event with Andy next week. I might join myself, actually.
Yeah, April 13th. April 13th. Yeah.
April 13th. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Please join. Please join and spread the word. We're excited about having them. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the day. And thanks for spending your lunch hour and a little more with us.
Thank you.
We're very grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina.
Bye.
Bye.